How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another edition of Athlete Sub Podcast. Back as always with Flexx. How's it going, Flexx?
Yeah, all good, my man. All good. How you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very good. And also here with Manko all the way from Ghana. How you doing, bro?
Everything's good, bro. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very good. Both, as always, thanks for joining me on a podcast today. And I thought it would be good to kind of do an episode on all things sort of Ghanaian football, actually. And for those of you who watched our previous episodes, particularly on the appointment of Carlos Queiroz as a new head coach of the Ghana Black Stars, we have briefly mentioned in both episodes the state of Ghanaian football and the challenges that it currently faces. And we kind of thought it would be a good idea to just kind of do an episode and just focus on areas of Ghanaian football and just sort of, I guess, dissect the issues. And of course, Amanko, you're in Ghana right now, so you probably be able to give us an insight into certain areas of the challenges that he faces right now. But yeah, I think just generally speaking, I think, of course, Ghana have qualified for the World Cup this year, and that's a positive. But at the same time, over the last 2 to 3 years, there's been a lot of negatives. And even recently, we've seen a player die in Ghana as a result of an assault or robbery. We've seen, obviously, a change when it comes to the GFA since 2019, but that's obviously not really worked. But when we look at Ghanaian football now, we look at, I guess, will we call it a decline, or is it a case of it's just struggling at the moment and it can get better? I think, Amanko, I'll start with you because you're there right now. Now, when you look at Ghanaian football right now, look at the state that it's in, right? Do you have any optimism, firstly? And secondly, to you, what are the main reasons why there's a bit of a struggle at the moment?
I think to not sound too pessimistic, I honestly, in my view, I don't think things will change anytime soon, because it's the same people who keep electing, it's the same people who keep giving the jobs, it's the same who are leading the country. So, I mean, unless somebody new comes up that can show that he can run the league, he can run the whole association, I don't believe there's a way things can change. Because if you look at the whole thing, like if you step back and look at everything, it's not from the bottom up, it's from the top down. That's where the problem starts. It all starts at the top, from whoever heads the association to the club officials, to the stakeholders, the investors. It all starts from the top. We'll get into it during the show, but that's my stance right now.
Yeah. How about you, Flex? So obviously we've talked about this quite a few times, haven't we? And there's been different factors, as Amanko has mentioned. But for you, what's the main reason why we're seeing this sort of struggle when it comes to progression of Ghanaian football?
I look at it in 3 different areas, right? So we've got the talent paradox, right? Then we've also got the economics of football in Ghana, and then we've also got the gap in facilities, right? So to start off with, right, if we're looking at the paradox of our players, what we tend to find, like probably most African countries, is that we produce elite talent, right? And we're talking about the talents that are like in more recent times, the Kuduses, the Partes, the IU brothers, etc., right? And yet those players, they don't stay in the no, I was going to say EPL, but I guess it's the GPL, and so immediately these boys are exported into Europe, right? So the Ghanaians don't even get to see them in the local leagues long enough, right, for there to be, let's say, a sustained interest in the league and the teams thereof, right? So that's one thing we can look at. Then if we look at the economics, right, then we got to look at the fact that a lot of the clubs rely on match day revenue, right? So all the different clubs in the GPL rely on that. And then there's also not large sponsorship as well for those different teams, right? I don't even know at this time who the main sponsor is. I have seen MTN a few times and whatever, but I don't know, like, typically who the main sponsors are, for example, kits, etc., etc. So there's a situation there. We all know how important as well TV rights are. We know that for sure for the EPL, how big and massive that is across the globe, TV rights. And the clubs get a very large share of those TV rights, which goes directly into reinvestment, whether it's by way of players, facilities, or global reach, or whatever else, right? I mean, if we're looking on the continent, you would say that the TV rights deals that we have in the GPL are not even comparable to what's in Nigeria or even South Africa and Egypt, right? You know, they have much stronger TV rights deals in those countries, right? Which then also helps fund and retain certain players for a longer period of time before they are also then shipped off into Europe. And then we've got to look at facilities, which is, I think, something that myself and Richard have spoken about quite heavily, right? We're looking at, we've got the image there in the top left where we're looking at poor pitches, right? Pitches that just, could injure you, that are genuinely a hazard, right? When playing. Then you've also got to look at the fact that, if you haven't got the right facilities, you can't really attract the best coaches, which then means players tactically don't develop in the way that they should do, and technically they don't develop in the way they should do. And for me, I look at it kind of, I put it into like two boxes, right? In Europe and in most developed countries, football is seen as an entertainment product, right? And if you're looking at Ghana and other countries similar to Ghana, football is more treated as a survival mechanism, right? As opposed to a product that is there to entertain. So the I guess what I'll kind of leave with is that if the pitches are bad, then the football will be bad. And if the football is bad, fans don't come. And if fans don't come, investors stay away. And that's the cycle. You see what I mean? So that's kind of where I think we are when we talk about Ghanaian football. And like Amankwa said, it's a mentality right from the top. And that just bleeds right into the national team as well, because it's the same facilities that the national team will end up using.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, obviously, you mentioned the facilities, and as you've said, we've spoken about this quite a few times, actually. Actually, that picture there is the Accra Sports Stadium. I believe it was actually built in the 60s, and I think he oversaw a brief renovation before the 2008 AFCON tournament, which I think Ghana hosted that year, right? And we've not seen a renovation since. And it's almost been 20 years. And I think you have to, because that obviously that stadium represents the country. And as Flexx said, when it comes to facilities, that has to be, that's where your players, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you haven't got the facilities to accommodate these talents and see them progress and ultimately get better and better, then I think you're kind of suffering in that first stage there, because as much as you can have talent, and we've seen players not just in Africa but around South America who have got great talent, but they've had to come to Europe and play in those countries to, again, make a name for themselves, play for the best teams, and ultimately be rewarded with the best contracts and win major trophies. But when you mention about the facilities and stadiums, right, I haven't, because I've not watched a game in Ghana before live, but are these stadiums ever full when it comes to matches at Manqua? Because when I've been to Ghana, everyone talks about the Premier League, the Barclays Premier League in England. And when you watch, as Flexx mentioned, the TV rights, it's not really showcased on TV as much, I don't think. But every bar you go to, every home, right, they're watching the English Premier League. So I don't know, are the stadiums full in Ghana? And do you feel like perhaps the lack of TV exposure is playing a big part as to the reason why there's not a big interest in the Ghana Premier League?
I mean, the interest in the product, it has been on a huge decline since the 2000s, early 2000s, because there are even clips on the internet. If you go on YouTube and look for Asante Kotoko House of Folk 2002, 2004 games, when you watch those games, you see the stadiums are packed. You can feel the atmosphere of the crowd and everything. But since then, it's progressively fallen off. Like nowadays, every league match, you see just a handful of people at the stadium, and even that is only at a few centers where there's actually crowds. Like I think they call them community clubs. So they are clubs in very sort of remote areas of the country. They have the fans to come to the stadium on match day, and even that is they are in their thousands, like 1,000 or 2,000 fans, or even 100. So they pack their stadiums, mini stadiums, I'll call them, for every game. But when it comes to the large scale, the elite clubs in quotes in this country, you don't get attendance more than like 50 people if you're lucky.
Oh, really? Is that bad?
Yeah. Very bad.
Wow. That's actually imagine. I mean, I don't know, when it comes to, in the lack of, because we've heard, obviously living in the UK, we've heard about how tough it is in Ghana right now, not just for football, but when it comes to the economy there and just working class people who are not being paid their salaries or wages. Obviously, that's affected the football side of things, where coaches and players have not been paid right. Now, why does this happen? Because we've spoken before, and we know that the GFA are allocated money, and that might be for the national team. But I find it hard to believe in 2026, right, where you've seen. You mentioned that there's a decline in the Ghanaian Premier League itself, just a standard of football there, but the exposure for African football is still there as a whole, if that makes sense. So why are we still in a situation where in 2026, footballers and coaches of their respective teams are not being paid their salaries? I mean, it wouldn't happen in Europe, would it? It just wouldn't happen. I mean, you hear clubs going into administration, therefore they can't pay people, etc. But those instances are quite rare. And the reasons why players and coaches are let go, or people at the club are let go, is because it's an admin, right? But these are clubs that are still quite active. So why are they not paying the employees?
It's simply because there's not enough money in the ecosystem. There's not enough money in the footballing pyramid. So basically, if you are running a club in Ghana, and the thing is that most clubs in Ghana are run by like one person, like a very rich CEO. Yeah, it's like they are like one person clubs. And
but if there's not enough money to run the clubs, why not just shut the club down then? Do you know what I mean, though? Like, if you can't pay, listen, we all love football, right? But at the end of the day, it's a business. It's a way of life for some people. That's how they got to survive. So if I'm playing for a football club and I could potentially get an injury, you know what I mean, Flexx? Like, you can get injury, you could lose your life at this, right? I'm not being covered at all by the football club because there's not enough money, right? So what incentive is there from me as a player or an employee or staff member to go and work there? And secondly, if you, as you mentioned, if you're a CEO and you've bought a club, if you can't pay people, why is it still active? Why is it still running?
I mean, I guess from, let's say, a player perspective, right, there is always the hope that you would make it into the national team, right? And so, you're going to try and give your best with the hopes and dreams that, hey, I might be able to make it in the under 21s, or from there progress into the first team, or what have you, right? Or an opportunity, if you're playing well enough, to also make it out into Europe, which is why we say the pyramid is a bit broken, because even in South America, you'll note that their talent, when we're talking like the major talents, they hold on to them a little longer before allowing them to go to Europe, because they have the finances to be able to keep them there long enough for them to enjoy that player before they go. And then once they've had this great career in Europe, right, typically at Barcelona or some club in Spain, they always eventually come back to that boyhood club, and thus the cycle repeats again. We don't even have that in Ghana, where I can say with confidence that, let's say, a superstar like Stephen Appiah, who is a legendary captain, Samuel Kufuor, legendary captain, these guys have gone to Europe, played for the biggest clubs, right, and has come and finished their career in Ghana. That's not even happened, because they don't have the facilities by way of the economics to even bring those guys back and give them something decent, and then, to maintain. So I guess to answer your question, for the young guys, I think it's just more back to that survival mentality, whereas like, if I play well enough, long enough, I should be able to make it out of here and into Europe somewhere, even if it's in the Norwegian Division 2, I've at least gotten myself out. And that's just what it is, in my opinion.
Yeah. What about you, Amanko? What's the general feeling around this subject? Because again, I've always maintained, again, like I mentioned, that if you can't cover players, because players, Flexx mentioned there that players have a hope they can make it into the national team or maybe be scouted by European clubs. But if you break your leg, for instance, you're not going to make it there. Your career is going to be very different to what it could have been as a fit player. So, what's the general feeling around Ghana around this type of subject? Amanko.
Wow. There we go. You there, Manqua?
See, like I said, I think with me, like I've said before, like Flexx mentioned that if players have the hope that one day they're going to make it to Europe or potentially play for the Ghana national team, they're going to hang in there. But my thing is that if you're not being covered by a football club at all, right, if you break your leg, you won't reach that stage. Or you might get there, but your career will be very different to what it could have been when you're physically fit at your very best. So what's the feeling around Ghana, around sort of the payments and stuff like that?
Well, some clubs get enough money to pay their players every month. Other clubs they delay payments sometimes, so like 1 or 2 months before you get your money. And there are some clubs that they're badly run out of the bunch. They can go like 6 months without paying their players, which is very bad. And I don't know how they are still allowed to run in the league. But like I said earlier, the leadership of everything is they just allow anything to run.
But isn't there any type of governance that gets involved in that? Because
there is.
Surely it's illegal to do that, no?
Yeah, there is.
Right. And what did they say about it?
They just ignore it.
That's the answer. You just ignore it. It's not their problem. But again, it's just these things because people, staff members that they get involved, players, their health is at stake here as well. So there needs to be a better attitude. And again, we'll go back to a situation that happened a few months ago, which was very, very sad, where Dominic Frimpong, who I believe played for Broken Chelsea, I think. I might be wrong.
Yeah. He was on loan.
Yeah. And he was killed on the way back from a football match by armed robbers.
Yeah.
And when we speak about the investment, we kind of expect that footballers, for example, in Europe, who travel to and from games as a team, there's a team bus. Even if they travel by train to different cities, they're guarded by security at all times. I've even seen players, I don't know if you saw Flexx, Cole Palmer was walking home once from a game, and he has security around him, right? Because anything can happen in this country, right? So when we saw that, my question was, as much as I'm not expecting the same absolute standards in terms of security in Ghana, surely there must have been a basic police escort or something like that. And that comes back to the question of investment. Are they investing, Amanko, are they investing in these type of things, not just on the pitch, but also security, things like that?
They are not investing.
Right.
That's a flat answer I can give you. There's no investment. Yeah. And it's become so bad that over the recent seasons, it takes the league sponsor. So if the league has a sponsor, a lot of clubs get money for like the whole season. So some can pay their players, some can clear their debts. But when the league doesn't have a title sponsor, that's when things get tricky. And it's been so bad that I think this year we still don't have a title sponsor for the Ghana. But the government lobbied for a broadcasting contract. So that would see each club paid 100 million, not 100 million, 1 million Ghana cedis. Yes, you can check the equivalent in pounds. But yeah, each club has been given 1 million cedis. So this is the money that most clubs are using to pay their players this campaign.
Right.
Wow. So the funds are even coming partially from the government to pay players' salaries, right? That's what we're saying here.
Yeah, like it's the whole ecosystem is terrible. Like they can't sustain themselves unless there's help, which should not be the problem. You're a football club. You're supposed to be run like an organization, make your profit, generate revenue. So I don't understand why some of them are allowed to run, even though there's there's committees and everything, there's policies, there's rules against like clubs not paying players and everything, but it's still allowed to run.
Yeah, but it goes back to a point though that Flex mentioned about players have the hope that they're going to make it to Europe one day or play for Ghana national team. Dominic Frimpong, I'm sure he had those aspirations as well. But these were matters nothing to do with him on the pitch. These were just maybe, listen, an arm robbery can happen at any time. He could have been in his personal life traveling and he could have been attacked. But on the team bus, right, I'm expecting that they're probably going to be looked after in that sense. But if football clubs are struggling to make payments to their players on a week-to-week basis, then the security facilities, all these different things, accommodation, that's surely got to be a challenge as well.
Big challenge. And the sad thing with Frimpong's passing, because most of our clubs in the country, we can only use bus. There's been zero talk about potentially using flights.
Yeah.
It's all bus travel, and I think the safety policies around traveling with a bus, you can request for officers, if you want to travel at night, but there's the urge clubs, the FA urge clubs to always do road trips in the morning, in the afternoon, never travel at night. So the unfortunate thing was that Frimpong's team, they traveled at night and they didn't have adequate security, and that's what happened. And it's a very sad thing because why didn't they get a protection? Why weren't they allowed to, or even halted from traveling in the evening? There's people who go with these clubs to prevent these kind of situations. They'll tell the club officials, no, it's too late to travel, go tomorrow morning. But I don't know what happened here.
But I mean, that's the thing though, Flex. It's like football's a sport that's played at all times of the day, right? And you have to be prepared that there'll be night matches, and even as fans, right, we go to night games and we travel back home, and it's not always going to be safe. But we're expecting that the things around us, or maybe it's police, whether it's people at the stations or just anybody, right, we're going to be safe enough to take ourselves home and also potentially our children home. So football clubs telling you to travel in the morning or afternoon, that says clearly that we always make an excuse for everything. There's not accountability in saying that our players and staff should be able to travel at any points during the day or even on the night time. We're saying, no, you should travel in the morning or afternoon because we can't be bothered, right, to come up with proper security measures to protect players. And that's the whole, in my opinion, that's the whole problem that Ghanaian football's got. We're looking for too many excuses. And the people who sit at the very, very top, they're not affected. His family, Dominic Frimpong's family, would have suffered massively, right? All because he's played football. That's it, just because he played football. Again, it happens in this country. Players are attacked and some of them unfortunately lose their lives, but it's not common though. If it does happen, there's a massive inquest as to, I know Flex, remember the Hillsborough disaster? I wasn't alive at the time, but that's been a big thing in the UK, the Hillsborough disaster that happened years ago in the 80s. Fans lost their lives. Even to this very day, right, people are held accountable and they still talk about those things. But it feels like in Ghana, Frimpong's passing is going to be forgotten about in 1 or 2 months. And then somebody else might potentially suffer that same fate. There needs to be more accountability from people at the top and say, listen, we need to look after people better, not just footballers, but just our people in general need better looking after.
I mean, I guess then what we're effectively saying is that, well, how do we convince young talent to stay when we can't guarantee their safety? Because even in, I would suggest probably even grassroots level in the UK and many other places, something like this will not happen, and maybe that goes a long way to speak to maybe the civilization of the people, because this was a non-footballing incident. So could it just be maybe wrong place, wrong time? Was it targeted? All of these different factors we don't know.
Do you think the Premier League run this country, do you think even the Championship, do you think a team bus will be targeted for robbery? A team bus on the street for robbery?
Not for robbery, but we know that team buses, let's say if West Ham was playing Millwall, would be targeted for vandalism,
Little things like that,
It's a bit different in that regard, but to the point where a player loses their life. I mean, if you remember, I think at the Bayor with Togo, there was a situation there where their team coach, I think, was shot at, right? So it goes to show that these type of things are not, let's say, I guess, condensed to just Ghana, but it happens across the continent, which is a great shame when looking at it. So, condolences to the Frimpong family, and let's hope that lessons are learnt there across the board. And although it's unlikely, I hope that the Ghana Football Association do the right thing by way of supporting their family through this tough period.
I hope so. And talking about the GFA, I mean, listen, Kroku, he is the current GFA president. I believe he was put in power in 2019. And we've spoken a lot about sort of the GFA and their failings over the years. The Ghana national team's not been at its very best in recent times, failure to qualify for certain tournaments. Do you guys think that there should be a new regime at the GFA? I'll start with you, Mankwa.
We can think that. We can all think. We have the freedom to think in this life, but for that,
or should there be? Should there be a new regime? That's a better question, isn't it? Shouldn't there be a new regime?
I mean, looking at the last election and seeing I think he ran unopposed because there was a court injunction on his opponent or something like that. But if you look at the potential people who can step up and be the GFA president, if there's an election tomorrow, there's not a lot of promising candidates. I don't think you find anybody. It's that bad.
Why is that? Is that because they're not capable, or what? What's the reason for that?
I don't think capability, but I think somebody with vision, like somebody who's been in the system. If a spot opens up and Kurt is not going to run for the next election, one of his friends, one of his pals, or people, one of the old heads in Ghana football, they will be the ones who will take up the role. And they have similar beliefs to him, similar ideas to him. So it's like you're voting him back, even though it's not him. There's no young person, there's no person with ideas, somebody who has come up and is pitching to clubs and is pitching to stakeholders in football that, if I come, we're going to do this, we're going to use AI, more security data, bring up new. You don't hear any of that. So, do I want a regime change? Yes, but I don't know who's coming to replace Kurt if there's an election tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like a man called says, Flexx, I think that I'm not even kind of that bothered about the person's age in terms of whether they're old or young. I'm just looking at somebody who knows what they're doing, really. We've seen a lot of changes at managerial level, and we're thinking, why did they make that change? They've fired people, they've hired that person again. Managers have been on a lot of money, they're not produced. It just feels as if we even had the scandal in 2014 about the payments at the World Cup, which led to Sonny Montari and Kevin Pitts-Boateng leaving the camp after an altercation with the officials there. It just feels as if we have people in charge who, bizarrely, they don't know what they're doing. And should there be a regime change? I think there should be. I think, like I mentioned before in a previous episode, there needs to be a real vision. Like Amanko said, there needs to be a strategy there, a progression. Not a case of, I think it feels to me as if we're very emotional about decision making there. There's not much logic there. It's okay, we've lost a few games, everyone's upset, okay, let's get rid of the person. But surely the best leaders are the ones who make the best decisions. So regardless of whether there's noise from the fans like ourselves or people who you believe in that candidate, you believe in your vision, and that's why you're there earning that money they're earning, by the way, to make the big decisions. Because when it doesn't go well at the tournaments, right, we're as fans, we're the ones who suffer. The players clearly suffer because they're not getting paid. Their reputations go down the drain. They're accused of not caring. And that comes down to the people who are running this stuff. They're not making the proper decisions, but you're paid a lot of money to do that. That's why you're there. That's why I'm not there. You're there in that position.
Amanko, so a question I have for you, right, is what's the general feel for the, let's say, connect or disconnect for the GFA? Do people feel connected to it, disconnected? What's your feel towards that?
It's the general feeling is that there's a disconnect. It's like they are up there and they don't really care about anybody else. I mean, the only thing I'll give the GFA props for is their focus on women's football. That's like the only thing that I can like put my money on the line, like put my money where my mouth is, that they've invested, they've improved, and now Ghana is exporting some of the best female footballers in the world. They're going to, the NWSL. Some are going to Europe. I think we sent a few to Spain. Yeah, so on women's football, we are producing some of the best. We are growing some of the best, and hopefully, we can bring a trophy down the line. But outside women's football is looking spooky, really, like really, is really looking spooky.
Because what I'm trying to understand, right, is it a people problem or a structure problem? Or is it both?
Both.
I think it's both. I think it's both because every time something bad happens, they'll do the usual PR. We are sorry this happened. Blah 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 blah. We'll set up a community. We are going to investigate. We don't hear about the findings. Don't hear about any new policies or plans or rules. Nothing. It's just forgotten about in a few months.
But what are we doing in Ghana? What are the Ghanaians doing to demand this stuff? Because you mentioned that you don't hear anything about the findings. There's no follow-up. What are the Ghanaians doing? Because it feels like when it goes wrong at tournaments, everyone's angry, really upset for a couple of weeks. And then, as you mentioned, we forget about it in 2 or 3 months. But what pressure are we putting these people under to be accountable and to give us proper explanations for the decision-making? Because it doesn't feel to me as if, as you mentioned, there's a big disconnect between the public and the GFA. But I feel like we allow them to be that way because I don't know, what's the media like? Is the media putting them under pressure or are they just the same?
Well, this is the thing, right? Because this is what I was going to say, right? Is the whole accountability thing, because we don't even really know who Kurt is accountable to, right? We just know it seems like he's accountable to himself. Right. So if he messes up or whatever, then it's, oh, my bad. And we move on. Right. But who is he actually accountable to when things go wrong? Who does he have to go to and report to? That is, I think, is there clarity on that? Like, do we know? Is this something that exists?
Maybe Amanko, you might know.
I honestly don't know, but I know that when it comes to Black Stars, and if we go to a tournament and we fail and everything, it goes up to the government through the Ministry of Youth and Sports.
Right. So there is somebody there above him, right?
Yeah. But in other matters, this is for Black Stars and Black Stars, but for other matters, I genuinely don't know who he reports to when like something tragic in the Premier League happens. I don't know who he reports to, but for the Black Stars, I think it's the government.
So a question I have for both of you and for the audience as well. So please, in the comments, I'll be grateful to hear your views and thoughts. Would an independent regulatory body improve Ghana football?
You could probably say so, because it feels as if anything that we're in charge of ourselves, it feels as if we're not getting the results. And it feels as if at times it comes down to, again, the pressure. The problem is if we compare it to here, which I constantly do, and that's probably not a good idea. Here, it feels like people have remorse. They've got a sense of, okay, this is my bad. This is my fault. I have to step down because I've done nothing. I made a decision that's cost us massively, whether that's a manager, whether that's someone in the hierarchy, or whether ultimately that's the president, right? We feel like, okay, we've got to step down because I've made a massive mistake and it's my fault. And ultimately the media puts you under pressure and the fans will also, there has to be an outcome, which is eventually you having to step down. But I feel like an independent regulator probably would, because the people we've got in charge, Flexx, I'm not confident that they're going to make decisions for the interest of the country. And that's what has to come first. Whether you're prideful or not, right? Something's got to be in you and says, you know what, I've been here for 6 years now. We're not improving. Maybe let me get to somebody else. Let me see if they've got a different vision. I've earned a lot of money doing this job. How much money do I need? Right? But unless we put them under pressure to step down, they won't step down because we're not making them do that. So the easy option, right, if we leave it how it is now, we've had an independent regulator, is for us to do what we want, right? And then when we eventually get bored one day, we'll say, you know what, I'm bored of this now. I'll pass on to the next person. If we leave it how it is. But independent regulators will probably think, okay, well, it's not in there. It's not all up to them now. Maybe there's more accountability. There's other people you've got to answer to at this point as well. and we might not see the stuff that we've seen going on for the last 10, 15, 20 years in Ghanaian football. So a lot of it comes down to, I feel like we need to be more pressure on these people to kind of step down, but also the people in charge, like, just put your pride away, and just, if you've not done a great job, just walk away, man. Like, do you know what I mean? That the country's best interest has to be at the heart of every decision that they make, and I don't think that's the case right now.
Interesting. Amanko, what's your thoughts?
Like an independent body, I 100% agree, but it needs to have robust people with morals, people who understand the game, people who are modern, like younger people. Like, we need younger, visionary people running our football instead of the old heads every time, because the old heads are still in charge. They are the ones who've run the league into the ground, and they are the reason why today we don't see any improvements. We don't see anything, but they don't want to change. They don't want to, give hand over power to people who are younger and have more ideas. So it's it's a very dicey situation. But I think an independent body is what specifically the Ghana Premier League needs. They need like somebody to run it like an actual league, to have standards, to have policies, to tell clubs that if you can't sustain yourselves, leave the league, that kind of stuff. But to find people to put together to do that committee is going to be a lot of work.
Yeah. What do you think, Flexx?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it would be a good idea, because then there is, a governing body that people are held accountable to, right? And that can only add pressure to get things done right, So that's what I think would be helpful. But I think that's a pipe dream anyway, because the people that are in charge would look at that as a threat, and that's not good for business on their part. I think when something is as broken for as long as it's been broken, people forget that it's broken, right? They genuinely think that it's working to a degree, and that is good enough, right, for, I guess, the nation or the people thereof. And we don't put, like you said, Richard, the pressure on them to cause a change. When we are, let's say, if we talk about the national team, if we are putting pressure on, it's just to sack the manager. But nobody is actually going deeper and, to the root cause of these things, which is, hold on a second, there are people that are behind the manager that are causing situations to be the way they are. How about we look to cause a shake-up in that environment? So it's a tricky one. I mean, and even if there was an independent board that was to come in, like Amanko said, who would be part of it? If it was younger people, we all know, culturally speaking, the younger people are not their voices are not respected amongst the older people. So then that becomes a problem, because now there's a bridge that's too long to cross. So it becomes...
Flex, sorry, Flex, we've got to get rid of all that stuff. This is a business. It's got to be done properly. In Ghana, no, I'm being serious. In Ghana, we use culture and we mask it with everything. That's why stuff doesn't get done the way it's meant to get done, Flex. Because the older people stay there, because you're the young boy. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry, you've done a crap job for this amount of time. It's time for fresh blood. But because we have this thing of culture where there's a respect thing there, people don't get told what they're meant to be told, Flex. Whereas in here, the Western world, right, if you can't do a job if you're 20 or you're 80, right, you're told that. There's no hiding place. We're not doing it personally. It's just that you're not capable of doing the job that you've been paid a lot of money to do. That's the reason why we call you out. Do you know what I mean? But it feels to me as if in Ghana, there's this thing where, like Amanko said, there's top people who can do what, like, who's allowing people to set up football clubs and not pay these people? Like, who's allowing that to happen? I think that's okay to do that. Do you know what I mean? We're a situation where the country as a whole, right, is at a point now where there's just no control. There's just no, and it's really sad to see that. It's really sad to see where it is right now. But we have to be, and I keep saying this, we have to be more angry as people. We've got to hold them to account. Because when it comes to election years, right, we get behind all these parties, but then we moan when our lights are going off, which is how currently happening in Ghana right now. We moan about that. When our businesses get ruined, we blame them. But when they're about to be elected and they're campaigning, we don't demand these things. We don't ask them, okay, what are you going to do with our sports? What about our kids' educations, their futures? What are you putting in place? What's the facilities we need to have? We don't ask these questions. But then when it goes wrong, we start to moan. But the people we're moaning at, they're the same people who convinced us to vote for them. So why didn't you ask them these questions at the beginning? Do you know what I mean?
You know, it goes back. If we look at the previous election that took place, right? And I'm not saying what party or whatever, but I remember Nana Kwame Bediako doing a very tidy presentation for his party, which is called the New Force. And the presentation was amazing, right? Very logical, very sound. It seemed like it had structure, a proper timeline, and he's a young guy. So, and he's been around. So not saying that the others haven't been around, but I'm just saying that it looked good. When you then go on the streets and then you ask people, so who are you voting for? They would go back to tribalism and vote for what their family would like, the party that their family associate to, even though it hurts them. That's the vote they make. And then I would make the comment, well, the New Force say that they're going to do this, this, and this. And they will turn around and tell me, oh, that guy is a crook. Oh, that. And then you just think, so how would things ever change if you never pick the change? Right? Because we know what the red party and what the blue party, what they're doing. And I guess this is across the board, right? Even here in the UK, we thought that picking Labour would mean that things would be much better. And then we've come to find out things are a lot worse, right? So why are we not actively, it must be some sort of human psychological thing. There's an option, which is usually the third or fourth option, which is a clear change, a clear pivot, right? But we still will vote red or blue.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is.
Well, what can we do, man? Listen, I think to finish off here, I'll ask you both, what needs to change? And I've said it before, I think there needs to be a change in mentality from the public. There's got to be a change of mentality among the people who run Ghana football. There's got to be some remorse there as well. There's got to be, I think somebody mentioned it, morals as well. We've got to realize we've got to have the country's best interests at heart. But like you mentioned, they're just Flexx. I think the reason people think that way is because we all want to change, right? But we're all hypocrites. We all want all these things to stop, but we're not going to make it stop. We say, yeah, we're against corruption, this, that, and ever, but we're not really making any measures to kind of make it stop, are we? We're just saying it. There's no action there, But yeah, for you both, to finish off, what needs to change to kind of get Ghana football back onto where we believe it should be?
I mean, the obvious thing is to put people in charge who actually do the work. If you don't have people in charge who do the work, then the rest of the pyramid, like, it trickles down. If you don't check if these clubs are actually sustainable, if you don't check if they are paying their players, I mean, all this will continue under you. So I think that's the basic thing. Like, whoever's in charge, they need to do the work.
And for me, I don't even want to answer the question. I want to give the audience 3 questions, right? That's what if you don't mind, that's how I want to sign off, right? I want to ask, how is it possible that one of Africa's most talented football nations, Ghana, known as the Brazilians of Africa, right, have one of the most struggling leagues? Please, in the comment section, if you can help me answer that question. And then, would you let your son or your daughter play in the Ghana Premier League, right? And I also want to know, is it a money problem or a mismanagement problem? Let us know in the comment section.
3 great questions there for our audience. Guys, as always, it's been very, very good. And again, viewers, thanks again for watching. As always, you can follow us on Instagram, X, and also we're on TikTok now as well. Don't forget. So if you're on that platform, do give us a follow on there. Of course, it goes without saying, please leave a like on the video and subscribe if you've not done so already. And again, listen, Flexx has left some very, very good questions for you guys to answer in the comment section. So we want to see your answers down there. But Mankwa, Flexx, as always, has been great. And I'll catch you in the next episode.
Yes, sir.